Of the public comp. Oh, I'm so sorry, John. Let me start again just because of that. Hi, my name is Tracy Craig. I'll be moderating tonight's meeting. This is the community meeting hosted by the Water Board for the Newport North Apartment Community, northern portion. We'll be discussing the draft feasibility study tonight, and we'll get into what that is in the next few slides. Next slide, Jessica. Hey, first of all, I would just like to discuss meeting ground rules. This meeting is being recorded. Everybody will be muted upon entering. We can unmute any of the attendees. We can also see you. So a little bit different format than we've been using before. We are more than happy to answer questions throughout the presentation. And of course, we'll save time at the end for questions as well. To ask a question, there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can raise your real hand, you can raise your virtual hand, and you can also use the Q&A box. So to raise your virtual hand, John, can you walk people through that really quickly?
Sure, there should be a button on your screen, possibly with the React, that allows you to raise your hand. I don't think anyone's on the phone, so
So there's a little React button at the bottom of your screen. It says React with a heart, and you can go ahead and raise your hand there. Um, Also, if you're calling in on a cell phone, to raise your hand, you have to push *9, and then to unmute yourself, you have to push *6. As a reminder, if you are raising your virtual hand, I'm going to need to unmute you, and then you'll have to unmute yourself using the blue button. For property specific questions, if you have any questions that are just specific to your property, please put your information in the Q&A section. There's a mistake on the slide. It says chat function. We're not using the chat tonight. We're using Q&A, and we will follow up with you tomorrow to answer any questions specific to your property. Also, if you have any questions that you didn't ask tonight, you can call the project information line. Number is down there. We also have it later on. You can call Jessica Law, who is the water board case manager, and you can email her as well. So I'm going to give people just a moment to take a picture of this slide so that they have that information. And then Jessica, if you could move on to the next slide. All right, so purpose of tonight's meeting again is to discuss the draft feasibility study, which will address it evaluates environmental conditions and then evaluates various technologies to address um, volatile organic compounds that are found in groundwater and in soil vapor. And Jessica will get into that in great detail in the presentation. We're in the middle of a public comment period right now for that. And the public comment period runs from March 10th to April 8th. We very much want to hear from the community on their thoughts on the technologies that are proposed. Probably heard about this meeting by getting this fact sheet, which nobody can see, I just realized. But this fact sheet was mailed out to everybody in the community. We also have handouts. So there are handouts that are available. There's the fact sheet that you got, this presentation, those will be up on Ford's website. We'll have information on that and also on GeoTracker, which is the Water Board's website. So I'd like to just take a moment to introduce who will be presenting tonight. First of all, we have Jessica Law. I think probably everybody knows her by now. She's been out here working diligently for 5 years. She's the case manager with the Santa Ana Regional Water Board. And then we have Mike Barnes, who is the program manager for WSP, which is Ford's environmental consultant. So Mike, just for some of us, let's raise your hand. And then thank you. And then finally, we have John Permani. John and I work together, been working on this project with his team for some time as well. And John is running all of the logistics. Next slide. Quickly, I'll go over the agenda. Obviously, we just went through what we're doing. Jessica is going to talk about the feasibility study and the proposed remedies. And then we will talk about next steps in the process. And then, of course, we'll have the question and answer section. And I want to encourage people again that you can ask any kind of questions throughout the presentation itself. If you are asking a question, I will ask you if it's a public comment, if you want us to consider it a public comment, or if it's just a clarifying question. So I'll be asking people that every time they have a question, just so that we're getting an accurate representation of the questions asked, so we can respond to them at the end of the public comment period. think that does it for me. And Jessica, please take over. Thank you.
All right, good evening again. During this presentation, it's more of a high-level overview. We are going to provide a recap. I'm going to talk about the remediation process and the remedial action objectives, and we're going to jump into the feasibility study along with the remedial alternatives. And because we're just providing a high-level recap and then going straight into the remediation process, if you have any clarifying questions on the work that's been done, feel free to interrupt and ask those questions. And then we'll go into the public comment kind of period and process, and also discuss the next steps for this project, and then end with questions and answers, as well as taking any formal comments on this draft feasibility study. So for the recap, we've had vapor intrusion assessment activities that began all the way back in 2018, specifically for the northern portion of the Newport North homes. That started more around 2020, 2021 type timeframe of getting more in the northern portion of this community. Now, the VI assessment activities that have been conducted have collected a substantial amount of data, and that data is what was used for the human health risk assessment report that looked at all of the data and evaluated both current and future risk. And so the conclusions for that did not identify that any current vapor intrusion risk is occurring at this time, but there is the potential for future risk. And it's that future risk potential that has us had the water boards requesting the feasibility study to determine the appropriate technologies to address vapor intrusion risk, and then also groundwater impacts. And the Santa Ana Water Board approved the draft feasibility study in or the feasibility study was submitted in May 2024. And we have commented on that, and it is now out for public review. All right, so before I start talking about the draft feasibility study, just want to take a brief moment to talk about the remediation process. So I've presented on this exact slide a number of times in past public meetings, but it is important to really understand this process and those timeframes for each step. So what we've had in the past, what we started out with was site investigation, and that is all characterizing the extent of contamination, doing the field investigations, and that risk evaluation. Then what was submitted, prepared and submitted, was the feasibility study. And that feasibility study looks at all of the remedial technologies and evaluates cleanup alternatives. And it also recommends an alternative. So where we're at right now is this public comment period. This is when we are announcing the recommended remedial alternative, and it provides that opportunity for public input. Now, once the public comment period is done, the next steps include remedial design. So part of that is going to include some additional characterization so that the remedy can be properly planned, and the design components can be appropriate for what's necessary for this particular community. That remedial design does include community protection measures as well. And this process also does include securing necessary permits from the city, county, and other oversight agencies. And then when it comes to remedy implementation, that would be the safe implementation of the remedy and then maintaining and monitoring the remedy. So this can be about a year plus. It's going to vary depending on, a lot of it to implement the remedy. That's what, can take the year or less, but it's the monitoring, the progress of the implemented remedy that can go on a little bit longer. And of course, timeframes, they can all change due to weather, permitting, and other factors. All right, so now let's start talking about the draft feasibility study. We also refer to this as an FS. The FS covered the following items, which I'm going to go over in more detail in the coming slides. But first, a big component of the draft feasibility study is it does propose specific remedial action objectives. It also conducted a feasibility study to evaluate the various remedial technologies that will achieve those remedial action objectives. The feasibility study identified and evaluated the remedial alternatives based on that feasibility study, and then proposed remedial alternative for the Santa Ana Water Board's approval and for public review and comment. And again, this pertains to the northern portion only. A separate cleanup plan was approved for the southern portion back in February 2024. All right, so this figure that is on the right portion of the screen, this the yellow outline is the Newport North Homes community, and the green shaded area is that northern portion that the feasibility study is pertaining to. So first, let's talk about those remedial action objectives, which are also referred to as RAOs. And those remedial action objectives, they're just simply the goals of the cleanup activities, and it addresses each impacted media, that media being groundwater, soil, soil gas, and indoor air. And the remedial action objectives, they can be a numerical value, but often they are descriptive criteria that are protective of human health and the environment. So first we have groundwater, and one of the cleanup objectives is to have decreasing concentrations in the monitoring wells that we have on site and future wells that are installed in the area. And then the other primary goal is to reach drinking water standards in a reasonable time frame. And it is required to reach those drinking water standards in a reasonable time frame, which is set forth in the California Water Code. The next media that we want to talk about for the cleanup goals is soil. Now, this is offsite. The former facility is about 1,000 feet plus south of this site. So we don't anticipate any impacted soil. We'll say that first of all. But regardless, we still have cleanup objectives for that. And so the soil cleanup goals are the environmental screening levels for direct exposure, and that any soil impacts are not adversely affecting groundwater. If soil impacts are seen, it's typically the impacted groundwater affecting soil. And we have that confirmation through ongoing groundwater monitoring. And then next is soil gas. So for this, we have site-specific screening levels that have been prepared based on a large data set, and also having stable and or decreasing concentration trends for these soil vapor probes within the community. And then lastly, for indoor air, the objectives for indoor air is to be below the residential environmental screening levels for the contaminants of concern for the site. So moving on with the feasibility study. This feasibility study evaluated the remedial technologies based on the following criteria. It was the ability to implement, the effectiveness, and cost. And so the feasibility study evaluated approximately 20 remedial technologies for cleaning up soil, soil gas, groundwater, and indoor air. And through that process, 9 remedial technologies were retained as feasible for implementation. So following the feasibility study, there were potential remedial alternatives were developed from those 9 retained technologies. Now, a remedial alternative is just one or more remedial technologies that are proposed to meet those remedial action objectives. And the remedial alternatives that are proposed are 1, no action. Now, I do want to mention that all feasibility studies do include a remedial alternative of no action for comparison purposes. The next one is alternative 2, and that included monitored natural attenuation for groundwater and soil vapor, as well as contingent subslab depressurization systems and indoor air monitoring. Alternative 3 included monitored natural attenuation for groundwater and soil vapor. There was groundwater extraction and treatment, contingent soil vapor extraction, and indoor air monitoring. And then finally, remedial alternative 4 was again more the monitored natural attenuation for groundwater and soil vapor, treatment of groundwater below ground, and contingent soil vapor extraction and indoor air monitoring. And I believe I missed a checkbox on this that also included contingent subslab depressurization systems. All right, so the remedial alternatives, they are then compared to the National Contingency Plan's 9 evaluation criteria, which are categorized into 3 groups, which is the threshold criteria, the primary balancing criteria, and the modifying criteria. Now, all of the threshold criteria must be satisfied for a remedial alternative to be considered. Therefore, that remedial alternative also, it has to be protective of human health and the environment, and it must comply with state and federal requirements. As a result, this is where alternative 1 of no action is typically thrown out as an option. Next is the balancing criteria. So these 5 criteria are used to weigh the major trade-offs among the alternatives, which is the long-term effectiveness and permanence, reduction of toxicity, mobility, and volume through treatment, the short-term effectiveness, implementability, and cost. And then finally is the modifying criteria, which addresses the regulatory and public acceptance of these alternatives. Community input and acceptance is especially important to the water board and also very valuable. And community acceptance is also mentioned in the statutes regarding environmental cleanup. So this is a very important criteria. So based on that evaluation criteria, alternative 4 was recommended within the draft feasibility study for our approval and to be presented to you all for public comment. So I'm going to talk in more detail on the components of alternative 4. I do want to note that while I'm going to talk about soil vapor extraction and subslab depressurization, these are contingent on vapor intrusion occurring and would also be building specific. And so first, let's talk about monitored natural attenuation. So this is just the natural processes that decrease groundwater and soil gas concentrations over time. Monitored natural attenuation, there would be ongoing monitoring to confirm those concentrations are decreasing over time. And for this proposed or recommended alternative, this would include the installation of 4 additional groundwater monitoring wells and 3 soil gas probes. The next proposed remedy would be that below ground treatment of impacted groundwater. So here what would occur would be injecting an organic compound such as sugars or vegetable oil at a number of locations, and this would accelerate the breakdown of contaminants. Now, ongoing monitoring is necessary to confirm the effectiveness, and also appropriate permits are required with the water boards for this implementation. Next is indoor air monitoring. Folks are familiar with this. This is just an ongoing monitoring process that we are requiring to ensure building conditions over time is not causing an increase risk of potential vapor intrusion. And then we have contingent soil vapor extraction. And again, this is vapor intrusion dependent. So this uses a vacuum to extract soil gas below the ground and draws it above ground for treatment. Those treated vapors, they're treated with carbon to remove those volatile organic compounds before that treated air is released to the atmosphere. And this photo on the right just shows what the treatment compound can look like. This is one of the treatment compounds that is in another community where soil vapor extraction is currently ongoing. And then next we have contingent subslab depressurization. Again, vapor intrusion dependent. This creates that negative pressure beneath the foundation, and it redirects those vapors through piping to carbon filtration to treat those impacted vapors, and then discharges to above the roof line. So the photo on the left, that's what this SSD system looks like. And then to kind of hide the equipment, there is an enclosure that can go around to match the building, and the photo on the right is what the finished product looks like. And it ends up, and this is what's been used in another community and has blended in nicely with the surrounding area. All right, so now I just want to highlight the proposed groundwater monitoring well locations. And so, as well as the proposed multi-depth soil gas probes. So we've got them highlighted here in these 4 different locations that have the blue highlighted circles around them. So this is to just better monitor the groundwater plume and the soil vapor plume. Now, the figure here that's on this slide, the ISO concentration contours are for TCE, and it is the soil vapor concentrations. But what we do see is that the groundwater impacts are in the same area as the soil vapor plume, because again, that soil vapor plume is originating from impacted groundwater. So this is very similar. All right. Now, this location shows a possible kind of conceptual idea of how groundwater treatment for the below groundwater or below ground treatment would be implemented, would be in this particular area of the Newport North, kind of northern portion. The exact locations, that's going to be determined when developing the remedial design and implementation plan, and also in our response to the draft feasibility study, the Santa Ana Water Board did have a comment regarding additional areas for the groundwater treatment that I will touch on in the next slide. And I will say that prior to any implementation of the remedial design, we will host another community meeting to provide more details on what that work will entail, how it will have any kind of potential impacts, things like that. Another component that was that's on this figure here is it shows the possible location of a soil vapor extraction system if it's warranted. And again, this is based on those soil vapor concentrations. All right, so on this slide, this is just zoomed out a little bit. But where we have a slightly higher groundwater concentrations is just south of the northern portion that this feasibility study entails. And so to ensure that the impacted groundwater that is, contributing to the soil vapor plume in the Newport North section, that there may be some additional groundwater implementation right along here to knock those concentrations down. And then that was just, that is discussed in our comment, our response to the draft feasibility study. All right, so then finally we have, in this remediation process, it's the public comment period, and this allows that opportunity for public input to the proposed remedy prior to finalizing the feasibility study. And the final feasibility study, that is due to the Santa Ana Water Board 45 days following the end of the public comment period. And the public comment period is from March 10th through April 8th. So we're right in the middle of it right now. Comments, again, can be submitted during this Q&A session. And you can also submit comments in writing to myself. You can either send them to me via email, and my email address is here on the screen, or you can mail them to me as well at 3737 Main Street, Suite 500 in Riverside, California, 92501. Again, your comments and acceptance of the remedy is especially important and valuable to the Water Board. So we are open to any comments you may have. So for next steps for this, first, we need to finalize the feasibility study. If we do receive any comments, that finalized feasibility study will include a responsive summary. Once the feasibility study is submitted to the Water Board, we will review and approve it, potentially with comments. The next step when we approve the final feasibility study is we will be asking for a remedial characterization work plan to be prepared and submitted for our review and approval, and then ultimately implementation of that remedial characterization work plan to adequately design the remedy implementation. Now, once that additional characterization is complete, then the remedial design and implementation plan, or RDIP, that can be prepared and submitted for Water Board approval. Once that's approved, then goes the process of permitting the work, installing additional groundwater wells and soil gas probes, conducting the groundwater treatment, and then having the long-term monitoring. So for additional information, you can go to GeoTracker, which is the state's database that has all of the reports, correspondences, lab data, boring logs, community outreach information. And the link is on this slide. For that, you would search the site ID. You can also subscribe to the LIRIS list, which is just the Water Board's email notification subscription. We typically send out email notifications for when the next public event is going to be. You can also view information on the Water Board's webpage. And you can visit Ford's site-specific webpage at fordnbfacts.com, or their information toll-free number. And then there's also a local information repository at the library. So that concludes this presentation. And now we are happy to answer any questions or take any comments on the draft feasibility study.
Right, thank you. One quick note, this presentation is being recorded and it will be uploaded to Ford's website, I know. And then John, I don't know if it's actually uploaded to
Yeah, a
GeoTracker. It is
copy
as well.
of, yeah.
Okay, so it can be
Yes.
accessed at both places. So
Correct.
if somebody could not attend tonight, or somebody has a question, they move in the area.
Yeah.
This is a further resource that is in both lives electronically on the Water Board's website and Ford's. So I am going to open this up for public comment. Again, this would be comments about the draft feasibility study. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you wish to see something different? What could we be doing better? Any and all comments are welcome and will be considered. Okay, we'll give people a couple minutes. We only have one attendee, but that's okay because people can always refer to this as a resource. And I'll just give a couple more minutes and in case they change their mind. Jen, why don't you go back to the slide that shows other options too? Or Jessica, not that one, other way. There you go. So
Which way?
again, that
This
no,
one?
that way, no, that one. So again, if you the one with all the information. There you go, additional information. Aptly named. So if you don't want to comment tonight, I just want to make clear again, multiple ways to comment during the public comment period, which runs through, do I want to say April
April
8th, right?
8th. Yeah.
Right, April 8th. So you can submit comments to Jessica, either via email or online. If you'd like to talk with her, you can call her or you can call the 800 number and we'll make sure that you get in touch with her. So multiple ways to provide valuable information to us. Okay, I'm going to assume, and I'm going to ask our attendee just to raise the virtual hand if you don't have a comment tonight. So I'd ask you to do that so that we know that we can end this meeting without missing what you might have had to say. It looks like, let me just see here. I believe that our attendee is not here. So I am going to, once again, let's just go back to the additional resources. We're going to end there. There you go. Oops. There you go. So for anybody that might be watching this at a later date, there's lots of resources out there should you choose to avail yourself of them. There's the GeoTracker website, there's the LIRIS list, there's the Water Board's webpage, and you have to search as you have to go to that link. Board has a specific website. There's an 800 number, and then if you like physical copies of things, that all the information, past presentations, fact sheets, technical reports are in the Newport Beach Library, right next to the city center. So I think that will conclude our meeting. Jessica, are there any closing comments that you'd like to say before we end?
Thank you for attending, and we are happy to receive any comments through the public comment period.
Okay, I would say so as well. Thank you so much, everybody,
Thank
and I
you.
wish you a good night. Good night.